in the European Parliament. Sorry, this event was held. Russian disinformation and propaganda regarding Ukraine in the light of its war of aggression and its impact on democratic processes in the European Union. This was a public hearing, well, I wonder who was involved in it. Well, here's opening remarks, and well, Nathalie Loiseau was speaking. Also, by the way, we'll just mention in passing, but we're going to focus on Nathalie's comments in a second, but Michael Sheldon from Bellingcat, perhaps unsurprisingly, involved in that as well. So anyway, we've got a couple of little clips from this. Let's listen to the first one. Yeah, let's just listen to this and then we can comment on it afterwards.
Once more, NG2 and CD have decided to have this hearing jointly, as indeed disinformation is fully part of Russia's war efforts. Actually, the issue isn't new, and Russia started to target Ukraine using inter alia propaganda and disinformation since 2014. We hardly paid attention then, except when the crash of MH17 flight took place and triggered countless Russian efforts to try to deny responsibility.
So Russian propaganda is what we've been seeing since 2014. Okay. In the next clip, she's talking about how do we counter this Russian disinformation. And there's one particular point in this which I think is of concern to everybody. So listen to this.
Malicious misinformation campaigns originating from Russia towards Ukraine are not a new topic either, as they have been continuously going on for years. What is unprecedented, though, is the breadth and depth of covert propaganda campaigns designed at deterring European public opinions to support Ukraine and to accept the increase in sanctions towards Russia. We just learned about the doppelganger influence operation, which was debunked both by EU Disinfo Lab and by Meta. From May 2022, Russia used clones of authentic European media, such as The Guardian, 20 Minutes, Bild or ANSA, to try to discredit Ukraine and spread a false narrative about the consequences of the sanctions on European citizens. Good news is that it was debunked. Bad news is that it was possible and that the culprits were not clearly identified. We probably have to better regulate the domain name industry and foster cooperation between state institutions, platforms, researchers and NGOs so that they can really join forces, prevent, expose and counter such operations.
So her claim there is that some people set up clone websites which look like The Guardian and other media outlets and use that to push out disinformation. And therefore, what they've got to do is to set up tighter partnerships with tech companies and others. And particularly, and this is the bit that we all knew was coming, but this is the first sort of public demands for it that I've heard, is to take control of the domain name system in order to make sure that certain websites can be easily, well, effectively domain names seized by through government mandate and websites taken offline. But she did make one interesting observation in this final short clip here.
I would also like to underline the consequences of Russian disinformation efforts outside Europe. Every single mission of our parliament in Africa, the Middle East or Latin America is an occasion to witness the efficiency of Russian propaganda and to deplore the weakness of our strategic communication.
So I just thought that was quite an amusing place to end. So she's decrying the efficiency of Russian propaganda and how, well, of course, the Europeans and the US and the UK, we don't use propaganda, we use strategic communications, but ours is nowhere near as good. So Vanessa, I'll come to you first. What are your thoughts on her performance there?
Well, it's interesting. She mentions, of course, the EU Disinfo Lab. I mentioned her connections to Syria campaign. The EU Disinfo Lab, allegedly, according to Emma Winberg, of course, became Emma Lemessurier, the wife of James Lemessurier, and became strategy director at Mayday Rescue. Emma has now joined the board of EU Disinfo. In fact, I'm going to be working on a section on that for next week. So, these tentacles are growing more and more connected and interlinked, as we know they are, and effectively what they're doing is creating the Iron Dome for truth, right? They're trying to basically prevent any truth entering discourse in the West. It's extraordinary times that we're living through right now.
Yes. Patrick, any thoughts?
Yeah, when you have collusion between any state bodies or even bodies that are being funded by the state indirectly, like Bellingcat, for instance, like Disinfo Labs, with the EU or the US government, in this case, these companies like Meta and social media companies, they can't claim the sort of we're a private company argument. That goes right out the window. Because if the government is colluding on any level, or sending blacklists, which has been proven in the United States through discovery in a recent federal case that's been taken out by members of the Great Barrington Declaration, who accuse Twitter and the Biden administration of basically sharing information of what posts to and what it takes down. Then all of a sudden, that private company defense that Facebook and Twitter and others have been behind, it pretty much is null and void at that point. Then the government is directly involved with them as a partner to deny citizens of their First Amendment right in the United States. That's freedom of speech. Then that is a violation. So the government can then fall under sanction or lawsuit for their actions, as can Facebook as well. Now, this has been thrown out or just dismissed by a judge recently, but they're going to appeal. So there's still going to be more to come on this issue. Now, what we saw here is just the European version of that, and I think it's kind of rich. I'll just make a comment. It's kind of rich that they have someone from Bellingcat on their panel. This is an organization that regularly puts out absolute tripe, and even involved in a scandal recently where they're handing out bags of cash through an intermediary to sort of get Russian pilots to defect and so forth, and using Ukrainian agents as well as part of this kind of trying to get intelligence and so forth. And this has been denied by Bellingcat. They said, "Oh, we're making a documentary film, and this was all nothing to see here. It was just a documentary film." Plus, they've been proven and debunked themselves multiple times. Meanwhile, they're actually getting funding from government agencies, NATO member states like the U.S. or the U.K., for instance. So it's the whole thing is ridiculous on its face. So this is just part of the wider ridiculous effort of fighting disinformation, when the biggest source of disinformation right now on this planet are government and the mainstream media, and that's beyond debate at this point.
Well, indeed it is. Okay, let's just put Vanessa's website. Vanessa mentioned this article here on Natalie Loiseau earlier on in the program. We'll just mention it here. So the headline is "Protecting the OPCW Against Transparency." Who is Natalie Loiseau? So go and read that if you haven't read it so far. Now, we were reporting